whenever we were on our vacation, we went to Renfest for half a day for a nephew's birthday party. And when I was there was a gentleman who was sitting at the table across from us that had a Z7, and I was like, looks like a camera. And, oh, hey, sir. Would you say that's a camera? And so I struck up a conversation with him because I can't help myself, and I ended up talking to him for like 15 minutes about his camera, while everyone else left me, and I had to go find them because they didn't want to listen to me talk to this guy about cameras.
So were you just like chasing after this guy, asking him about his camera?
He was just sitting there, kind of just enjoying his coffee, and I was like, "That is Z7." Hey, buddy. Tell me about your camera. It was a Z7 Mark II, and I distinctly remember myself on this podcast saying the Z7 Mark II isn't even out yet.
And then there's this guy, back in the Middle Ages with already having
literally in the Middle Ages. Yeah. So apparently, I, like everyone else on the internet, is not up to speed on Nikon because everyone's forgot they exist. I was at the camera store today, and you look at all the used lenses, and it's like one little case for Sony, one little case for Fuji, two cases for EF lenses, and then like 6 cases for Nikon.
There's always so much Nikon stuff in the used section.
I feel like that's the hack. You go out there, like it's for sale right now for Christmas. You get a Z6 for like $1,200, like a Z6 Mark I. Still a fantastic camera. Uh-huh. The colors on Nikon are great, 14-bit RAWs, all that cool stuff. It can output RAW to video to a Ninja, and then you have this plethora of used lenses because nobody wants Nikon. It's perfect.
That is true. I mean, it's a good point.
So this guy he's shooting a Z7 Mark II, which came out 2 years ago. I know. This is the most embarrassing part.
Not what I was expecting you to say.
Oh boy. So I was really wrong about when the Z7 Mark II didn't come out. Yeah.
Well, what do you think of it?
Anyways, he's been using it for 2 years because he bought it right when he came out. He shoots mostly on zooms. He shoots portraits. He has the 100mm macro, and I was like, "Do you use that as a portrait lens?" And he's like, "Yeah, I use it for portrait lens, but mostly macro." And he primarily is shooting on the 24-70 and the 7200 2.8, like pro level zooms, and he like loves them. He's, "Oh man, the resolution, blah blah blah," and he's talking about the 42 megapixel sensor, and he was talking about how whenever he shoots with his model that she can't hear the shutter, and usually the rhythm was like, you're shooting with a whatever D750, and so it's like shunk shunk. And oh, there's the mirror. Let me repose. Shunk shunk.
Yeah.
And so, but now he's like shooting with electronic shutter on this Z7 Mark II, and she's like, "I can't. Like, do I change poses?" He's like, "Just do your thing." And I'm just gonna hold down the shutter, shoot whatever 15 pictures in a second, and she's like, "How'd you take so many pictures?" So it was really funny listening to this guy talk about that process, and like it completely changed his model workflow. And he's like, "Yeah, whenever it was on a Sunday, he's like, yeah, yesterday was one of the busiest days out here, and I took over 1,000 pictures."
Wow.
Blah blah blah. But he's using the Z7 Mark II with the battery grip, so it's got 2 batteries plus a battery in it. And he said he never has to worry about the battery life. He can go shoot 2,000 pictures, and he doesn't have to change the battery. He doesn't have to swap out the grips or anything. So full frame, 42 megapixel, pro photographer out there shooting. It was cool to talk about him.
How much is that camera?
Shoot. I think when it came out, it was comparable to like an A7R4, but now because nobody knows about it, Mark II. Yeah, 3,200 new. Looks like 2,600 right now on Nikon's website on sale.
Bad.
So that's the same price as basically an A7 IV. Why would you not buy this over an A7 IV? It's full frame.
It's Nikon.
It's more megapixels. I bet it has comparable video specs. I bet it outputs RAW. So you got 4K 60, you got 4K 24. You can shoot 120 full HD. I don't know anything about I don't shoot Nikon video. I know that they pushed really hard when they came out with the Z6 and the Z6 Mark II. Well, the Z6 Mark II is basically Z6. So, man, this is really interesting. I need to learn more about this camera. $2,600 for a 45 megapixel sensor?
At full frame.
Yeah.
With all the used lenses you could possibly want.
Is that the cheapest full frame?
No, Canon R6 be cheaper.
45 megapixel though. Like if you want something that's over 40 megapixel, is there anything cheaper than that?
A7R4 is probably close now.
And I mean new. And by new, this is a 2-year-old camera.
Yeah, so you'd be able to find a used one.
Yeah. Well, I mean, but if you're buying used, you could buy Z7 Mark 1 probably for $2,000.
I mean, used, you could probably find a Z7 Mark II used if it's a 2-year-old camera.
$1,600 from Adorama.
I mean, that's a really good deal.
Okay, I'm interested. From KEH 1552. Dang.
Might be time to pivot to Nikon.
I don't know. I think we need to talk more about Nikon. I think we need to do like a deep dive on Nikon.
We probably should. It feels like they're so forgotten, especially in video.
My dad's a Nikon shooter and has been for the longest time. He shot Canon when he shot film, but he shoots Nikon now, and he has a Z6 Mark 1. I've played with it. It's a cool camera. But he was talking to me about the rumors for the Z8, and he's like super pumped about it. And I tried to look up some rumors for it, and most people are speculating that it's going to be the same sensor that's in the A7R IV. Because that's what Nikon does. They use Sony sensors.
Okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah, but obviously, like, Sony's going to use their own best sensors. But whenever the Z6 came out, it was the same sensor as the A7 III, I think.
Okay.
Like the exact same sensor. And so right now, people are assuming that when the Z8 comes out, it's going to be an A7R4, but in a Nikon. Like the exact same sensor, probably a different processor. So you're looking at, 62 megapixels, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, okay.
Which, that could be cool. He's kind of interested in it. Nikon's always been cheap on the bodies, expensive on the lenses. But like I said, I mean, with how much used Nikon gear there is out there, because everybody switched to Sony and Canon, then, it's, I don't know, like, good options.
Yeah. My first DSLR was a Nikon. They seemed good back then. It's just that it mostly seems like they've fallen behind a bit in the modern mirrorless camera, like that sort of thing. So that's what I'm not so sure about.
Also, probably all those used lenses are mirrored lenses. They're I don't even know what it is. N mount?
F?
Yeah.
F mount.
F mount, right. And you'd have to adapt it.
Right.
Ugh. And I just get tired of adapting glass. Anyway, Nikon. So that was a cool conversation.
You think is the Renfest pretty good place to take pictures, you think?
Yeah, I didn't bring my camera in because the person I was with was like, don't bring your camera inside. And I was like, but think of all the cool pictures I could take.
And I mean, it sounds like an ideal place to take pictures, honestly.
Yeah. And I regret it every single second that I was there without my camera. And when I was talking to this guy, I was like, yeah, I didn't bring my camera in. I didn't think like person I was with, don't bring it in. So I didn't. And he was like, I wouldn't come in here without my camera. Like looking me dead in the eyes. He's like, you're not a photographer. I'm like, oh, I'm so sorry. Almost went out to the car right then. They left me anyway. I could have gone out to the car without even noticed.
It sounds to me like it'd be worth it just to take pictures. That's all you did.
Next, I would like to go again because I had fun. It was cool. We didn't see a lot of the shows. We'd like to see more of the kind of the shows that they do, and definitely going to bring my camera in next time, no matter what anybody says. Anywho, cool. Yeah. So that was Renfest Z7 Mark II. It exists. Came out 2 years ago.
Welcome back to the Camera Gear Podcast. I'm Daniel.
And I'm Lucas.
And we're back to talk more about the gear side of photo and video. So what are we talking about today?
Well, same deal. I went on a trip. I went to the Great Smoky Mountains, the most visited national park. And I shot a bunch of pictures, which, like, I bought the X-H2S in, I don't know, July. I pre-ordered it in June, got it at the end of July. Mm-hmm. And we've shot a ton of video on that camera. But every trip that I've taken since then, I just brought my X-T3 because it's smaller.
And those were mostly trips that were not focused on photography. You weren't going to shoot an event. You were just like...
I was just going, and I was like, I want to have my camera. So I brought the X-T3 because it's smaller. I brought one prime lens, real small kit. This time, I brought the X-H2S. And so this was the first time that I did a lot of photo shooting with that camera, like where my main focus was just taking pictures. I shot one video clip the entire time with that camera, which is strange for me because I'm a big video guy, but I like to shoot pictures. I like taking pictures. And for things where like I'm, on a vacation and I'm, bringing my camera, I'm going to national park or whatever, and I want to take pictures to remember it. I find that for me, I look at pictures more than I look at videos.
Yeah, definitely.
Like I could have shot a ton of video on, and this is always in the back of my mind when I do trips like this. I'm like, oh, I should just shoot video, vlog with my phone or just take a bunch of video when I'm there. When I get back, I'll do like a 5-minute cut of all my favorite moments, and then I'll have this little video memory that I can go back and watch. But in reality, like, I'm going to upload them to Google Photos. I'm going to have my Chromecast play the pictures on the TV. And when I want to think back of like, oh, what did we do for that trip, back in November of what year was it? 2022. And I'll just like search November 2022 and like there's all the smoky pictures and I flip through them and whatever.
Yeah,
and,
it's easier to casually or even passively have it on in the background.
Right. For me, photos are more accessible than video. So for that reason, I'm just shooting photos this time.
And the hardest thing, in my opinion, is doing both. Like anytime I'm in a situation where I'm supposed to be doing both photo and video, if I'm at an event or something, I just have such a hard time with it. I never know which to prioritize, and I hate switching back and forth. Like I'd almost rather just pick one and do the one.
So one of the things with the X-H2S is it has that record button right next to the shutter button, and it'll record in whatever settings you're in, and you don't have to worry about re-exposing or anything as long as you don't care about the 180-degree shutter rules. Mm-hmm. You can just hit the record button and capture the moment. I didn't even do that. And mostly because I forgot. Like it's right there. I could have just been like, boop, video.
To me, it's just a different mindset.
It's a totally different mindset. Yeah. So I barely shot any video. One clip, so I'm not going to count it. I didn't shoot any video, just photos. And I kind of wanted to talk about shooting photos with this camera because like it's a photo camera. Yeah. It's not just a video camera.
It's a true hybrid camera, so you should be able to do both.
So I had a lot of takeaways and I kind of wanted to chat through it.
Cool. Well, let's hear it.
All right. So I shot basically everything on the 17-70 Tamron 2.8 zoom, which is stabilized and weather sealed. And the first day that we were driving out, we took the Skyway, the Chattahoochee.
Everything out there has weird names.
Yeah. So we took the Skyway from Tallahassee or whatever it's called, down through to somewhere in North Carolina and then back up and then the tail of the dragon. So it was a windy motorcycle roads. But it was rainy that day. And we stopped at multiple different looksouts. We stopped at a waterfall and I took pictures in all those locations, but it's raining all day, right? And so I got a chance to test out the weather sealing. And I knew in the back of my head that Tamron was weather sealed, but it doesn't say WR anywhere on the lens. And so I was
kind of questioning it a little bit.
Yeah, and I didn't have cell service. And so I was like, is this really weather sealed? Oh boy. I'm like looking at the lens, checking for like an O-ring. I'm like, we're just going to go for it. And so I also I didn't have the hot shoe cover on my camera because who has a hot shoe cover? So I shot a lot in the rain that day with the X-H2S and with the 17-70. No problem so far. Everything seems like it's still working perfectly fine. Didn't get any water in the camera or on the sensor or whatever. And
now how much rain are we talking? I mean, was the camera like wet to the touch?
Yeah, like I had to wipe it off with a towel every time I got back in the car.
Okay.
So it was decently wet, but not for like sustained periods of time. Yeah. And I wiped it off after immediately because I was like,
I never know how much to trust weather sealing. I like the idea of it, and I want that on my cameras, especially if I'm going to travel with it. But it's so hard to risk it.
Yeah, well, like I bought the insurance on it because it's a $2,500 camera, and I like the peace of mind to do like more risky things with it.
Well, and I always think about that potato jet video where he had the EOS R and he like got splashed in the huge puddle. You remember that one?
No, I don't.
Yeah, there was a video where he was testing the weather sealing on the EOS R. And it had just rained a bunch or something. And so he stood on the side of the road and he got somebody to drive his Jeep Gladiator through this massive puddle. And so, they splashed it. I mean, he was just completely soaked head to toe and the camera was fine. So,
nice.
So I think weather sealing is pretty good.
Yeah, it's like don't submerge it. Submerge. It's the hard G. Submerge it. Haha. With the rain and everything, perfectly fine.
That's good to know.
So I was real happy about that. I did have a few situations. Let's call it a feature of the Tamron lens is that if you hold it vertically, it will automatically zoom in and out.
Yeah, that's one-handed use.
Yeah.
Right?
So there was a few times where like I zoomed in and I like kind of held the camera up using the flippy screen and was like going to take a picture and it's like and just zooms out on me like, oh well, that's annoying. Thank you.
That is annoying.
So that's still a problem. Wish it didn't do that.
Yeah.
But I don't know. You spend $800 on a lens, I guess, you can't have everything. Like switches on it to turn off or a lock or an aperture ring.
Sounds like you don't like that lens very much.
It was like I brought the 85 millimeter and I brought my 30 millimeter and I I basically didn't use them. I mean, most of everything I was shooting was outside, and so I didn't need 1.4. 2.8 was fine. I love the shallow depth of field look, like, just as much as the next guy or girl. But when, like, if you're taking a picture of a person and you're like, you want their whole freaking head to be in focus.
Yeah.
And if you're shooting 35 millimeters and they're 4 feet away, you got to shoot it at 2.8, 3.5 in order to be able to get enough depth. So that means a 2.8 lens, and I shot a lot at 2.8, but I probably most of my pictures were between 3.5 and 5.6.
I mean, I do the same thing with product photography. Mm-hmm. If I'm taking a picture of something, I want the whole thing in focus. So, I mean, a lot of times I'm shooting at 6.3, mm-hmm. you know, and you just don't need the shallow depth of field.
Yeah. I mean, I love it. And it has its place. It's got its look, but really most of the time you just don't need it and you don't want it.
Yeah.
So anyway.
And I guess if you're traveling, it is kind of nice to not constantly be switching lenses and mm-hmm. all that.
And also, like, if you're when I'm traveling and shooting stuff like this, just for me, I would like the pictures to be in focus. And unless I'm trying to be really artsy or really careful, most of the time it's like I got to capture the moment right now. And I don't have the time to be like, just like, hold on for a second, I got to get this in focus mm-hmm. or whatever. I mean, I'm not shooting on Sony. So, the autofocus is only so good. But, I mean, you just have to shoot in whatever f3.5 or 4 or whatever. And that's on crop sensor. I mean, I'm not even shooting full frame.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. It is kind of a good point. I think that I feel like wide aperture stuff is a little overrated.
Yeah.
And everybody's like, oh, I've got to have the f1.4 version of this lens, not the f1.8, you know, on full frame. And it's just, there are very few situations where I actually want to be shooting wide open. I use it in the dark a lot, but anything where it's not dark, it's like, I don't really need it to be that wide.
Yeah. I think there was a big push for it on the internet for a while there, and it's eventually going to probably pull back around. I mean, if I'm picking between two primes, I'm still going to pick the one that can go to 1.4 because it's more versatile. But like for this specific situation, that Tamron I think only goes out to f16.
Now that could be a problem, and we actually had that problem a little bit at the Big Bend shooting too, because you can't stop down enough if it's really bright outside.
Nobody talks about that enough. It's I was shooting. I left my ND filters in the car because I'm an idiot, and I'm trying to take pictures of waterfalls and trying to get the smooth water, and I just can't get it. I can't get it slow enough because it's just too much sunlight. And I'm like, stop down to f16. It's like, wow, sure wish this could go to f22. And,
yeah,
you know.
Mm-hmm.
That I would, in that specific situation, would have traded the 1.4 for the 22.
Yeah, that is interesting, and I don't think people talk about that enough.
Speaking of shooting waterfalls, the X-H2S is advertised as having like 7 stops of IBIS.
Right.
I was able to shoot. Part of this was like whole not enough f-stops thing, but even ignoring that and overexposing by 3 stops or whatever, I was able to shoot down to around 1/10, 1/15 shutter speed, right around there. And like when you're shooting pictures, usually the rule of thumb for avoiding handshake, if you have no stabilization in the lens or in the body, it's double your focal length.
Right.
Is basically where you want to be for your shutter speed so that you don't get handshake.
Right.
So if I'm shooting at 50 millimeters, I want to be at 1/125, 1/100, somewhere around there, ignoring subject movement. If I have things moving in this frame, I try to hit 1/250 to avoid subject blur. But I would shoot like 1/125 if I was shooting a 50 millimeter lens, and exact thing that I'm doing here. And so I can stop down to 1/15, 1/10, which is 4 stops total. Before I start, my hand shaking starts getting in there. Maybe I'm just drinking too much coffee. Maybe it's because I'm like kind of crouched down on my feet and like holding the camera over here, and I'm not like doing the most stable,
right,
whatever. Yeah. But still, I felt like, sure, the spec sheet said 7 stops of IBIS, and it's geared towards photo. It's for long exposure, but I felt like I was getting maybe 4, and that's with lens stabilization plus body stabilization.
I've always felt like those specs were probably a little bit aspirational, I guess, in the sense that I don't know if you actually get 7 stops, and I almost think it's more useful to think of it as in comparison to other cameras. So if you hear 7 stops on one camera and 5 stops on another, I think you could reasonably say the 7 stop one is better IBIS. But actually be 7 stops in real life.
I mean, I feel like I've watched some DP review videos where Chris is out there with an Olympus camera that advertises 5 stops, and he hand holds it, drops it 5 stops, and he can get a steady image. And sure, like it's not an A/B comparison because I'm not him, right? But for me, I was kind of disappointed that it wasn't better.
Yeah,
and that like when we shoot video with it, you can still get a little bit of jumping. If you're holding it still, it's fine. If you're panning, it's fine. But if you're trying to do like a natural movement that has more than just like a left or right, up or down, or stable, you still get a little bit of that like frames kind of holding and then jumps.
Yep.
So
I agree, and I'm happy that X-H2S has IBIS, and I feel like I can notice that it has it. But I mean, I came from a GH5, which is still, I think, really well known for its IBIS, and it does not compare to that. The GH5, it was like I had to try to shake it enough to get camera shake.
Right, and you're talking about like the frame jumping, not just because that's kind of what I'm talking about. Is like this. Yeah. You want it to look like natural handheld. You just don't want jitters.
Yep.
And the X-H2S isn't quite there. Fuji's not.
I agree.
Totally there with our
and
even on
the 17-70 with its lens stabilization, I just still feel like most of the time when I shoot video, it's not quite as stable as I want it to be, and I'm happier if I can put it on a tripod or brace against something or whatever.
Yeah, I had the exact same experience when shooting with the 50 to 140. It's like at 140, even with lens stabilization plus in-body stabilization, it's still a little shaky.
Yep.
And that's, I don't know, it could be better. It's kind of what my takeaway was, having shot photos with it. And I'm like, usually I'll let the video thing slide. I'm like, well, it's a camera, right? It's for photos too. But in this case, I mean, I'm getting maybe half of it. So as far as the stops that they're saying.
Yeah. No, that's disappointing.
Which, it could be me. I'm, usually hanging by one arm upside down off a tree or something.
Yeah, I mean, that's the ideal way to shoot photos.
I mean, how else would you do it?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's all part of the art, right?
Right, exactly. Yeah. Yep. Just jumping from rock to rock over a stream. Why isn't it stable? Anyway, I want to talk a little bit about the autofocus, but I guess I want to hit a few of these things first. So there's a bunch of like little quirks that I keep running into with like different settings make disabling other settings on the camera in an annoying way.
I've hit the same thing.
Yeah, but like it doesn't tell you. You're like, why is autofocus continuous disabled? I don't know. So you can't AFC while time delay shooting. So what that means is you're standing there with your beautiful bride and you're holding the camera out like a poser to take a selfie.
Yep.
Because it's the best camera you've got, right?
For the gram.
Yeah, for the gram. You flip that screen. You flip the screen all the way around. You're holding it up and you hit the 2-second button because you don't want to have to like hit the shutter, right? So you set it on a 2-second time delay exposure. Okay. And you're like, I just want it to face detect.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to hit the button. It's going to count to 2 and it's going to take a picture. Can't do it.
That feels like a pretty big miss.
Yeah, you can shoot an AF single, or you can shoot in manual focus with time delay on.
Wow.
And I'm like, if you're taking a group picture, let it autofocus. If you're like, our autofocus is super good or whatever, then let me put the freaking camera on a tripod, set it to 10-second exposure, set it to AFC face detect, and then go stand over there with all the other people and take a group photo.
I agree. That's goofy.
Yeah, so I was not shocked. I wasn't like, oh my gosh, but I was surprised. I was like, why is this a thing? So that was annoying, and fix it, Fuji. I don't know.
That whole thing with the settings is just really frustrating because it seems like what they should be able to do is have it grayed out if it needs to be grayed out, but it should have a little note and tell you this is disabled because this other setting is enabled. Because I've hit that with some video stuff too. It seems like mostly with the autofocus settings. That's the one that I remember too, and I don't even remember the specific one that I ran into before. But yeah, that's super frustrating, and you end up like hunting around in the camera trying to figure out which setting you enabled that made that not work.
Another one, you can't adjust photometry when subject detection or eye detection is turned on.
And photometry is metering?
It's metering. Yeah. It's center weighted, average weighted, or whatever. And that one, I don't understand.
That just seems like a bug.
Yeah, because it's like, sure, I want it to face detect, but I would still like it to average the whole scene because there's a landscape behind this person, and I don't want the sky blown out. And why can't I change it? Why is it?
Now, did you do enough testing? Do you know, like, does it keep the setting that you had it on, or does it force it into a specific?
I think
setting?
it uses it's a separate metering function.
Like it meters
doesn't
based on the face. Or
yeah,
something?
it doesn't matter what metering you had it in before. It just meters based upon, I guess, the subject, based
Probably
upon
the face, right?
Yeah, it's taking the face detection or the subject detection. It's going to meter based upon that because it's like I'm focusing on that. Why would I not want that to be perfectly exposed?
I want to be able to pick that.
Yeah,
like that's a cool option to have, but I want to be able to choose, face detect metering or not.
Yeah, like it. That could be like a fourth option in the photometry settings. So like meter based upon subject, and then here's all these other ones.
That's annoying.
Yeah, that was really frustrating because I usually leave face detect on and I'll set it in like AFC and be taking pictures of things, but whenever I swing over I want to take a picture of the person I'm with, it's like, oh, I have to change my photometry settings.
Yeah,
or I have to
that's
turn off the thing or whatever.
Done.
Really, really frustrating. I think those are the only two big annoying things. You can't set face detect when you're in manual focus, which
that's fair.
Obvious, I guess, but whatever. You can set autofocus override by turning whenever you turn the manual focus ring.
Right. So like you're in autofocus.
Yeah.
As soon as you turn the ring, it puts it in.
Yeah. So like you say you're trying to take a autofocus shot. You're in AFC because you're just like in AFC. And when I shot with my Fuji X-T3, I almost always shot in AF single.
Mm-hmm.
And I did the whole like single point focus on the thing, reframe, focus on the thing, reframe.
Yeah.
And like that's how I worked. And with the autofocus update to the X-T3 and then with X-H2S, I've been trying autofocus continuous where you set it to all and then it gives you the focus box that you can adjust the location of with your thumbstick or the touchscreen and size with the wheel. And then it has the whole range. And you can do it with single point, but where it's the single box and that anyways. And then you half shutter on and put that on whatever you're taking a picture of. And then you can reframe the camera. And the advantage of doing that is that if the thing moves or your reframe moved in or out from your body from where you had it originally, it's continuously autofocusing on whatever the thing is.
I see.
And so to me, I'm like, if this can work, if the camera can hold on to that thing that I'm pointing it at before I reframe, I'm going to get better in focus shots.
Sure.
In practice, if it's not a really well-defined subject, the camera just hunts back and forth. It'll just... And we try and take a picture of a waterfall. It's like it gets the water and then it just follows it down into the bottom of the waterfall. And I'm like, just stop it. Just like freaking just focus on the freaking...
It's like auto-focusing on a single drop of water.
Yeah. And so this is the situation, right? I'm like trying to take a picture of a waterfall and it's just like the focus box is like water down. I'm like, just freaking stop it. And so like you turn the focus ring to push it into manual because that's the set thing, right? It's like override into manual, but it doesn't stay in manual forever. And I didn't realize that until this trip where I turn the ring and now the clock's ticking and I'm like, okay, now that I've set the focus, I have 2 seconds to figure out my framing and take this picture before it goes back into autofocus continuous.
Is that true even if you half press the shutter?
That's like, I'm like half pressing the shutter and then, because it doesn't work if you don't. You half press the shutter to set the focus and then you turn the focus ring and you're like in this weird, or origami yoga type situation where you're like holding all these different, button configurations. And now the clock starts ticking. And it's like, oh, I have to set my frame and take the picture before it's too late.
It feels to me like it should not go back into AFC until you release the shutter button.
Yeah.
That would be a very reasonable way for that to work.
It sure would, Daniel. That would be very reasonable.
They need to put us in charge of this Fuji firmware. I think we've got some good ideas.
Oh, boy. Where do I submit my feedback? So that was frustrating.
Yeah, it is.
Let's see. What else? All right, so... the autofocus, I put this in there because of a video that I was watching. I didn't really see this as too much of a problem for me, but the Fuji autofocus, if you're shooting on a really low depth of field, it has problems grabbing the iris versus the eyelashes. Even though it's doing its eye detect, it still isn't quite on Sony level of being able to grab like the eyeball.
Now, how close are you shooting to where you can tell the difference between those?
This is a problem for me in that my significant other wears glasses. And so I'm always like, if I shoot at a low enough depth of field, it will frequently grab glasses instead of eyeballs.
I see.
And I want pictures of balls, not glass. It's, I don't know. I didn't necessarily have that problem this time around because I was shooting at such wide apertures because I want the whole person in focus.
Narrow apertures.
Thank you. Narrow apertures. Like, and not even that narrow, right? 3.5 or whatever. Yeah. And so not a huge problem for this trip, but it's something that has come up before with the Fuji autofocus. So that's another, I guess, this is just me complaining about autofocus apparently. And on that subject, I had a surprising number of focus misses, or of where like I took a picture of standing at wherever the Laurel Falls and get the falls, and the person's out of focus. And I'm like, geez, I swear it was in focus. And I think what was happening is that I was basically using the camera wrong or whatever.
You're holding it wrong.
I was holding it wrong. Yeah. So like if you set it in AFC and you set it to single point, and rather than like zone or wide or all, and then you set it on subject detection or face detection, it will face detect or subject detect in a radius around that single point.
Okay. And
that way, if you're trying to take a picture of like multiple people or something, and you want it to do continuous autofocus, but you want to be more specific about the area that it's selecting from, you can use single point and AFC together to do this.
Okay.
And so that's what I was doing. And I would set the focus range on a person and like half shutter to get it into autofocus mode, and then reframe. And when reframing, I would move that centerpiece too far away from the person, and then it would stop eye detecting on them and shift to the background.
Oh.
And so I was mixing my focus methods of, like half shutter reframe or setting it at all and letting it face detect and take the picture. And so because of, it's just I'm not used to the camera, right? Like I said, this is the first time I've done a ton of photos with it, and you're going to have these kind of learning experiences.
Yeah, that's why you got to practice a lot and take a lot of pictures and all that.
So there's a number of shots that I got where I was like, oh, this is just totally out of focus, or let's focus on the background instead of the person.
Yeah.
And I think that 9 times out of 10 it was because I had it in single point AFC, and I focused it on the person, reframed and shot, and by the time I shot the picture, it grabbed the background and I didn't notice.
Interesting.
And I turn off the whole, show me the picture for a half a second after I take the picture.
Oh yeah, I never have that on.
Because I don't chimp.
Yeah.
I'm not a monster.
Yeah, I don't ever have that on.
So I just, anyway.
Although on the Fuji kit, you can have peaking turned on with autofocus, right? Can you not?
If you, not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
You can, if you do the manual focus override, the peaking will come on.
I see.
But I have problems with Fuji peaking in that it turns itself off, and I don't know what setting turns it off. And so frequently I'll go to manual focus and the peaking's not on, and I go into the settings and I have to turn it back on.
I've noticed that too.
And I'm like, I don't know what turned it off.
Yeah.
Like there's no warning of like, hey, when you turn this setting, it's going to turn peaking off. It's
for me, what it is that I set my custom mode sometimes to not have it on because I'll be shooting an event and I know I'm going to use an on-camera monitor, and I don't want peaking on both. Like I just want peaking on the monitor, and so I'll turn it off then. And I think that becomes like a custom setting virus where like it gets set one time, and then as I switch to other things, if I have like auto update turned on or something, like it'll keep that. But
this was a problem with the X-T3 though. Also, it would be like if I switched a certain mode or switching between video and photo or something, the autofocus peaking would just get turned off automatically, and there's a setting that triggers it, and so it's beyond just the whole custom mode thing.
I guess I was thinking about that because the peak, if you had peaking on, you probably would have seen like, oh, this is in focus instead of that. And when I use the camera, most of the time I leave it in manual focus and I use back button autofocus to do like AFS, I guess, like single point autofocus, which is fine. I mean, obviously, like that's not good for doing subject detection.
You could do that with continuous too, right? As long as you're holding it.
I think you can. That's typically what I do, and I like it because I can use the peaking to see exactly what's in focus all the time, and so I don't ever have to worry about that. But it doesn't really work if you're doing like subject detection or something like that.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, sometimes you do just need to trust the camera, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. The autofocus it's so improved for the X-H2S, and I just feel like there was a lot of things where it's still missing. Like if you try to take a picture of landscape or water or whatever where there's not a clear subject, and obviously, maybe that's the problem. It's like I'm trying to take a landscape photo, it just can't. It can't figure it out.
Yeah,
and also like certain modes, which I wanted to talk about the HDR mode. I didn't even realize it was in there. I know they added it for the XT4, but I was playing with the HDR 800 plus mode, and it just like the autofocus is worse in that mode for some reason because of like the way this is doing the bracket exposure.
I guess it's like not pulling as many autofocus frames from the sensor or something.
I don't know. It's like the exact same subject in HDR 200 versus HDR 800 plus. Like it was like locked on and then jumping all over the place. I don't know. It just feels like the autofocus is still kind of like you learn to work with it, but it's just not there.
It's so much better than Panasonic in terms of things like subject detection, but it's honestly not on Sony level.
It's not a deal breaker for me, but yeah, you're right. I mean, everyone keeps saying it, and I'm like, yeah, autofocus is good, but after doing this trip, I'm like, man, there's a lot of things where the AFC just isn't there.
Yeah, you do see the shortcomings.
If you're single point focusing and reframing, then you won't even notice the difference. You're like, it focuses like that, super fast. And you just don't notice it. You're like, boop, done. And so like if you're AF single reframe and that's your jam, it's perfect. But the AFC stuff isn't there.
Yeah. Well, that's good to know.
I noticed that whenever you have the top screen on the camera and there's a light for it, and I was actually shooting in a dark enough situation where I couldn't see the top screen, and so I hit the light and it doesn't turn off. You hit, it's a toggle, not like a be on for a few seconds and turn off. I thought that was kind of a nice feature of like you flip it on and now it's just lit up until you turn the camera off and you turn the camera back on and it turns off, or you hit the button again and it turns off.
I mean, that thing probably uses so little power.
Yeah,
it's probably fine for it to stay
just a little LED. So I thought that was a nice, plus for the cameras. You hit the button, just turns on, stays on. So
I like that there's a dedicated button for that.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to give up a custom button to get that functionality.
Yeah, so that's real nice. And then in looking at like the back of the screen and taking pictures, I've shot thousands and thousands of images on the X-T3. And I really like the way that classic chrome looks in certain situations. And this could just be like memory or whatever, but looking at the back of the screen on the X-H2S at things like classic chrome or nostalgic neg and comparing it to the photos that I've taken with those film simulations, they just don't look the same or as I would expect on the back of the screen. There's a lot of pictures that I've taken in playing with the camera for this trip where I shot it in like nostalgic neg or classic neg, and I'm like, I look at the back of the screen, I'm like, this just like it's blowing out the highlights too much, or I don't really like the way that it looks. But then I bring it in on my computer, or I look at it on my phone, and I'm like, actually, I really like this picture, and I really like the way that it looks, and it's almost like the screen is projecting too much contrast or something. I don't know. Weird. It looks different to me, having not done like a side-by-side A/B comparison.
Yeah.
Which now I want to do that. I'm going to grab my X-T3, I'm going to grab the X-H2S, I'm going to use the same lens, and I'm going to take like the same picture with the same film simulation.
Yeah.
And then do a comparison on my computer and kind of see like if they actually look the same, because it is a different sensor. And that was something that people noticed whenever they switched from the X-T2 to the X-T3, which was the X-Trans 2 to the X-Trans 3 sensor. And the X-Trans 3 sensor was like a third stop darker in most situations.
Right.
And so like new sensor means new whatever. And like even Gerald Undone, like comparing the X-H2 40 megapixel sensor versus X-H2S, slight magenta shifts in the comparison.
But what you're saying is not necessarily a difference in the sensor. You're saying that just the camera screen doesn't seem like it shows things the same way the computer does.
Yeah, it looks slightly different to me, and the film simulation doesn't seem to look the same as the other camera to me. This is like going off of memory of like,
yeah,
and it could just be a matter of like I was taking something of a different exposure or whatever. So
yeah, I'd be curious to hear if you do that test.
Yeah, I don't know. It's something I noticed, but it's probably just me kind of, being like, is this right? Anywho, I got a chance to finally use a flippy screen camera for photography for a good chunk of time.
What'd you think about that?
Boy, I hate it. I hate it so much.
It's definitely not as good as the tilt screen for photography.
I thought that like I love it, and then I'd be like, I'm just gonna close the back and use the eyepiece, and this is gonna be my jam. And like I want to. Sometimes you want to take a picture where it's not. Like, you're not trying to like take whatever sneaky shots or anything, but you don't want to be super obvious of like, here's this camera up to my face and I'm taking this picture. Yeah. You just kind of want to like snap something.
Yeah, you're trying to get like a casual, like street photography is the term for that,
right.
I guess.
And so like you're holding it, chest level, waist level. And with a tilt screen, you can kind of tilt the screen so you can see it at, say chest level.
Yep.
And you can just leave the tilt screen in that position and not be really that worried that whenever you're like, because what I do is like I'll wear a wrist strap and I'll hold the camera by the grip and I'll just hang my hand down and just hold the camera and then pick it up and take a picture. I want to take a picture. I don't want to do that with a flippy screen with the screen just
it's like out to the side.
Yeah, it's just gonna get knocked off. Like someone's gonna walk past me and slap the screen off. I don't know. But with a tilty screen, like you tilt it and you set it and you forget it or whatever.
Yeah.
And so having to all just like frequently actuate that screen open or close. I found myself taking a lot more portrait pictures because whenever it's closed with the back, the screen facing in, when you flip it out 90 degrees, you can then take a low exposure shot in portrait very easily. And because of that, I took significantly more portrait shots than I ever take.
That's going to be perfect for your Instagram.
Oh, I know. I mean, I never shoot in portrait. And this time around, I shot a whole bunch in portrait. So that, I don't know, cool that like the way that the camera is configured changes how I shoot, but I don't know. It was mostly just annoying.
Yeah, that is annoying. And I mean, anytime you're behind the camera, I do think a tilt screen is preferred.
Sure.
As a solo shooter, I mean, I do prefer having a flip screen because it does come in handy at, a surprising amount of time, like framing yourself or, if I'm doing product photography, if I'm doing product video, sometimes I want to have the camera on a tripod over my shoulder and be holding the object and like turning it in my hand or something. And I like the flip screen for that because I can get it into some position where I can like look off to the side and still be able to see it. You can't do that with tilt screen.
No, you can't. And if you have the screen facing out but flat against the back and you now want to reposition that screen, you have to flip it out and turn it 180 degrees.
Yeah.
And I found myself in multiple situations where I would like kind of be able to pull the screen out, or I already had it out and I would have to like put the screen in my mouth and then turn the camera to get it positioned and then frame it.
Is that because you had like a coffee cup in your other hand or what?
Sure. I mean, like I'm just doing stuff with this other hand. I'm holding on for dear life over here. And I'm like, I can't quite see the screen. I guess I have to like...
Never had that problem.
Yeah, so it was annoying. It was great for when I wanted to like flip it around and like take a selfie of me and someone else. Like, I did that 5 times and it was great. For everything else, boy, I wanted a tilt screen, and for that reason, I think the screen on the A7R4 is the correct solution for all cameras of all time.
I mean, certainly, I think if you can get both in the same screen, then like that's totally what you want. Given that we can't get that for whatever reason, then it's hard to decide. Like it's hard for me to pick which one I'd prefer.
It's the classic like this is what I wanted for so long, and now that I have it, I hate it. But like not really, because like I love it for the thing that flippy screens are good for, but for just photography,
I think you get used to it. You learn how to work with it.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's no perfect solution.
I don't know. I guess if I was going to go out and just take pictures, I think I might prefer an X-T5. Get the 40 megapixel sensor. You're not having to deal with CF Express cards. You get the whatever, the dials and all that stuff, and you have a tilty screen.
I think that's easily the right answer. I mean,
it's smaller.
If you're in the position that you can buy both of those cameras, then I think that makes perfect sense.
Or if you just straight up don't need video features, boy, the X-T5 is such a better buy.
Yeah.
I mean, you save.
You could buy a lens.
$800. Yeah, you could buy a lens.
Get a 16 to 55 or whatever. And,
sure. Yeah. Anyways, whatever. I'm still happy with whatever that X-H2S.
Whatever camera.
Whatever the stinking camera is, video, blah blah blah, 14-bit, etc. Vlog, this, that, and the other. All right. I actually used bird detection, which I never thought I was going to do. I took a picture of a woodpecker.
Oh man.
And a pigeon and a duck.
Did it detect all those birds properly?
Just it right on the eyeball. Did a great job.
That's good to know.
So, bird detection works. Never thought I'd use it. Here we are. Lots of bird detection. Battery life. I shot a whole bunch. We went up to this whatever overlook thing, and I was at like, it's, it gives you like 5 bars. And I was at 3 bars of battery, so almost halfway. I'm like, man, we're still gonna go hit up that aquarium and like do some other stuff. I need to pick up my other battery. So like we dropped off some souvenirs at the car. I grabbed my other battery, put it in my bag, and I didn't switch to that battery for the rest of the day. And that was, so I basically shot almost 3 days. How many pictures did I take on this whole thing? 1528 divided by 2. There's some iPhone pictures in there. So I took maybe 600 photos total. So say 300 of that for half the time on a battery over multiple days. Right. And then I only swapped the other one because I was like, I guess I should. And I basically ran it down from 5 bars to 2 bars. So really solid battery life, like surprisingly good, where normally if I was in that situation with the old 126W whatever batteries that Fuji uses on the X-T3 and older, I would have used 2 batteries in that time. So the new battery with the new processor, was really, really happy with that.
Even on video, I've been impressed. When we did the shooting at Big Bend, I thought I was wondering if I needed to buy a 3rd battery, and I had brought a USB power bank with me, so I thought I might need to run off of that eventually. I never had problems with battery life. Basically could make it an entire day of shooting with one battery.
Yeah, so I'm just real happy with that. Whenever I first got it, I wasn't quite accustomed to the grip, and I wasn't super happy with like how I held the grip. And like with the X-T3, I got really used to be able to balancing it off of 2 fingers and like holding it to my side and just kind of balancing off those 2 fingers. And then I wasn't worried about it because I had a wrist strap on. And I kind of got back to that same groove, having used this camera enough this trip that I found a comfortable way to hold it in one hand and just kind of, be able to rest it on my fingers with the grip. And so it turns out I am happy with the grip, even though I wasn't.
I assume you
before.
did not have the cage on it?
No, I didn't have the cage on it.
Yeah.
Trying to make it as light as possible. It with the 1770 and the camera, after walking around a whole day of just kind of like holding the camera, oh boy, your fingers get a little tired of holding it. And so it's definitely heavier, definitely noticeable that it's heavier than some of the other Fuji bodies, but still the grip is decent, and you can do a whole day of shooting with it. And like your hand will be a little tired afterwards, but it's good. So I talked about the HDR modes already, but I knew that they had released this in an XA series camera, and I guess I knew about it in the X-T4, but I haven't used a camera with the HDR feature in it. There's a ton of different bracketing modes, like way more than the X-T3. Like you can do ISO bracketing, and you can do focus stacking bracketing. You can do exposure bracketing, like up to 5 different pictures, and there's a lot of options. But one of the bracketing options is HDR, which is the same thing that your phone does, where it takes 2, 3, 4, 5 pictures and then stacks them together to create an HDR image. And in the Fuji body, when you shoot in HDR and you shoot in RAW, it saves all 3 RAW images into a single RAW file. And so the RAW file is like 3 times as big.
Oh, weird.
Yeah, but it has all of that dynamic range data.
Huh.
And so I played with it a little bit, but I just...
Do you have the ability to pull out an individual photo, or is it just like a single photo?
It's a single photo.
Interesting.
Yeah, I think you could probably do some whatever with it in Lightroom, but yeah, I shot with the HDR. I kind of was messing with the images, and I didn't notice it being that much wider, but it's just something that I guess I've never even seen that on other cameras. I'm sure that maybe like your Sony or something can do it, but it's not something that anyone ever talks about as far as like photo stuff, or at least of the things that I read. So I thought it was a cool feature. It basically will you can shoot in HD 200, 400, 800, or 800 plus. And what that is it will do, that's 2, 3, and 4 stops. It's like ND filters, 2 to the second, 2 to the third, 2 to the fourth.
Sure.
Right. So that means it's going to take a picture, and then it's going to take a stop at, the picture 2 stops above and 2 stops below, and then do the HDR composite. And so if you have moving stuff in there, if it moves too much, it might be a problem. But that's 2 through 800. And then 800 plus, it does it with DR settings. So the Fuji will also do DR 100, 200, and 400. And what that is it does an ISO restriction on you. So 200 is at ISO 320, and 400 is ISO 640. And it's basically the same thing as like whenever you're shooting video, like it locks it off at a higher ISO to get more of that top end.
I see.
And get like more dynamic range on the sensor. So 800 plus HDR bracketing shoots 3 exposures at DR400 ISO 640 and gives you like the most dynamic range that you could get into a single photo.
Huh.
From what I can tell, I think you're going to get better. You're going to be able to do more and get a better image doing bracketing instead. If you lack it, bracket and stack it. So yeah, I think you're going to get a better image if you just do like a 5-shot bracket and then do it in like Lightroom and post. You're going to be able to get more of like that really stupid looking HDR effect. But if you just want to have like an extra stop on the top end because it's blowing out, the HDR feature seems pretty neat.
Huh. I haven't ever messed with it. I don't know if I ever would have thought to mess with it, but that sounds pretty good.
Trying to push those photos around in Lightroom after the fact, it doesn't feel like there's any extra like noise savings. Because like, you know, Lightroom, like if you take a picture that's underexposed and like you push the shadows up, the shadows are just a little noisier than the highlights that you expose for. It's not like that noise is better with these HDR RAWs, at least from the few minutes of playing with them that I can tell. So cool feature. If for most like landscapey things, not really what you're looking for probably, but if you need more dynamic range and you don't want to bracket it, it's kind of cool that it's built into the camera.
Yeah, I'll have to mess with that some. It sounds pretty neat.
Other thing I noticed, you can change your film simulation, your highlight and your shadow tone curves in camera, and ignoring the custom modes, because whenever you set up something in a custom mode, you can choose if it applies to the next custom mode or whatever, or holds the settings or resets whenever you change it. But if you're shooting in just solely in PSAM, program set, shutter speed, aperture, manual, if you change like the highlight tonality because you're shooting in like classic neg and you don't want it to be quite as harsh, and then you switch it to Provia, it doesn't reset those whatever S and whatever
interesting
settings. And so you have to kind of watch out because you might be in like shutter speed priority shooting in one film simulation. And when you switch to aperture, it doesn't change your film simulation settings, which you wouldn't necessarily want it to. But then if you change your film simulation, it doesn't reset the H and the highlights and the shadows. So not really a problem or anything. It's just something that I kept catching myself doing, whereas like I would goof with the shadow tonality for one film simulation, then I would switch it over to another one and I would forget. And I'm like, why does this look washed out? And it's like, oh, because I set the shadows to -2 or whatever.
Yeah.
And so just something to be aware of, that because I didn't set any of my custom modes for photo for this. I really just ran between program, shutter speed, and aperture, and maybe like a little manual. And so it was nice that it held the setting, but annoying when I forgot.
Right.
Let's see. While I was out there, I changed my custom buttons.
Oh.
Yeah. Under the advice of a YouTuber, I set because by default, the autofocus is the front button, the front bottom button, where it is on all the other Fuji cameras. That's a manual switch. And I switched it to the back D-pad so that I can easily like tap the down button and then tap it again to start scrolling through and easily change the autofocus. And I was switching autofocus around a lot for this, just between AFS and continuous and manual. And I found it annoying. Like if I'm because I have the flippy screen closed because it's annoying. And so I'm holding it up to my eye and I want to change the autofocus, but I need to be able to see what I'm doing because it's not a manual switch. And holding it up to my eye to look through the viewfinder and then reaching down and toggling the D-pad thing is awkward and weird. And I don't know. I didn't like doing it. And so what I ended up doing was I switched it to the front ring finger button, the one that's by the grip, to change that to the autofocus. And so when I'm holding up to my eye, I can push that button and then scroll with the back wheel.
Oh, I didn't think about using the wheel.
Yeah, so you can use the wheels to toggle through it.
That's pretty convenient.
Yeah, so that worked out way better because I can like be in position to take the picture with the camera up to my eye, hit that ring finger button really easily. I don't have to like reach up on top or like find the button on the back. It's the only button on the front. It's right by my finger, and so I hit it. Scroll the wheel one click and then half press the shutter and I'm out of the menu.
I might have to try that.
So
it sounds pretty useful.
Yeah.
Would you do that for video too, you think?
I mean, it's the same. I guess you can have separate buttons. You can. Yeah, I'm going to do the same thing for video. Yeah. I don't want to have different custom mode buttons because I'm going to end up reaching for the wrong button at the wrong time.
Right.
So that's, to me, like that was better. And so I moved my focus check back to the auto exposure button because I previously had the auto exposure set to photometry. And then I changed my D-pad buttons to match exactly to my X-T3 again.
Oh, okay.
So those are the same on both cameras.
That's probably more
And
convenient.
then auto exposure is now photometry, and then the front button is my autofocus. So
Cool.
I think I'm going to be happy with that. It feels way more natural for me whenever, like, just how I'm using it, because if I was using the back screen all the time to take the pictures, then the down button thing would make a ton of sense. But because I'm like, usually I'm just keeping that closed and I'm putting it up to my eye to take the picture, because the viewfinder is really good.
That makes sense. I guess the big question I'm curious about after all this discussion is, now that you've used the X-H2S for photos, do you think that for future trips, would you take that for a primarily photo focused thing, or would you use the X-T3?
I think it comes down to how light I want my setup to be. The X-T3 with my 30mm lens will fit in my Peak Design Tech pouch.
Yeah.
And that's great. Like, I just put those two things in there and I don't even have to think about it, right? And then I can just put it in a bag. So if it's like really not photo focused, I'm not going to bring those. But it's a new sensor. It's a better sensor and stacked and all that cool stuff. And the X-H2S has better autofocus, has new film simulations that the X-T3 just don't have. So like, I can't shoot in nostalgic neg or whatever. And I don't know, it's like there's enough new features in the X-H2S that it's better for me for photo.
Okay.
With like the bracketing and stuff. And so I think that like any sort of big trip that I take, I'm going to bring that camera instead. But I mean, when I was packing for this, I almost brought the X-T3.
Yeah.
Like, I had everything packed and I was like, I could just put the body cap on this and slide this in my bag and bring both cameras. And I put it in my bag and I was like, don't do this.
Too far.
Yeah. I was like, oh, and I had the batteries and everything packed and I'm like, no, it's a bad idea. Because sometimes it's just easier to carry that camera.
Yeah.
It's not that much smaller. Like, you compare the two and they're, close. It's not really that much. Like, just use the newer, better camera. You spent $2,500 on it. Like, it's a better camera. Like, and I keep reaching for the other one.
Yeah.
Because I'm so used to it, and it's just wonderful. So I don't know. I'm definitely going to bring the X-H2S with me, but there's going to be times where the X-T3 just makes more sense.
Sure.
I do think long term, I will probably sell the X-T3 and upgrade it to an X-T5. Like, a year or two down the line, right? When the X-T3 is 6 years old or 5 years old or something. And I'm like, okay, it's time to upgrade this thing. It is worn to the teeth. Let's sell it and get an X-T5.
The X-T5 looks really good.
It's smaller. It uses the newer batteries. It has a 40 megapixel sensor. Like, that X-T5 is really appealing as just a travel photo camera.
Yeah. If it goes down a little bit in price, or if you get it on sale or something, I can see that making a lot of sense.
Yeah, I could see it like 2 years from now or something, year and a half or whatever. Sell the X-T3 for whatever, $600, and then buy a used X-T5 for $1,200.
Yep. Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and then that's a nice upgrade, $600 out the door kind of thing.
Yep.
I think that's the trade that I would make kind of down the line, and it's going to pair really well with the X-H2S as far as the video features. So,
well, I'm glad you got to try it on photos, and like you said, we both shoot a lot of video. I've done some product photos with my X-H2S, but not a lot of photos generally. And that's something I've really been wanting to do, is just go out and shoot more photos with the camera. So it's good that you got that chance.
Yep. And I've been working through a lot of the pictures in Lightroom, kind of, finally just getting into it, editing some of the photos. And I've been really happy with a lot of the shots. I mean, you can really push those RAWs around that Fuji puts out, and it all looks really good. So I'm very happy with it. Very happy with the colors. I mean, it's just classic Fuji stuff. So I wouldn't say the photos are night and day. Like, when I switched from the GX7 to the X-T3, the quality of the photos from that Panasonic to the Fuji was just huge.
Yeah, I remember that blew you away.
I was shocked at how much better the pictures were. That was one of the reasons I fell in love with that camera. The X-H2S from the X-T3, I guess they're better, but I mean, I might be hard pressed to like pick the two pictures apart. They're the same 26 megapixels, and it's the same camera company, and like the X-T3 is still a really good camera.
Yeah.
And you can find them cheap too.
Yeah, that's great that it held up that way.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm really happy with it still, and I think I'm gonna be happy with these pictures, at least the ones that I've gone through so far. Great noise performance. It all just seems really decent, apart from the autofocus mishaps and
Right.
and that sort of thing. Otherwise, pretty happy with everything so far. And if I have any more impressions after I'm done going through everything, I'll let you know.
Cool.
I did upgrade Lightroom before I started editing these pictures.
Uh-huh.
And Lightroom Classic, they rolled out more of the masking features, and they're like stupid good.
That's like the AI masking.
Yeah, like I took a picture of my wife, and her hair's like blowing in the wind because it was windy, and I did the background detect, and it detected it, like skipped the strands of hair.
Wow.
Like finger width strands of hair kind of in the air.
Uh-huh.
It was like, oh, that's the subject. I got the background behind you. Don't worry about it. And I'm like, this is so good. I can't believe how good it is.
That's cool.
That it's like you can select the background or the sky or your subject. And that's why I don't use Capture One.
Yeah.
It's like the features, those editing like smart features in Lightroom they've gotten really, really good.
I mean, Lightroom is a great program, and I know sometimes you've had trouble with Fuji RAWs in there, but I mean, it's so easy to use, works really well, uses a ton of RAM, like it seems great.
Yeah, well, like the Fuji thing is always in the back of my mind, I'm like, these pictures could look better in a different photo editing software, because Lightroom still hasn't quite figured out the demosaicing that Fuji does in camera. Like Fuji's ability to figure out where you have that quad green pixels in the X-trans array of like what color that actually is, still it's better than Lightroom. If you, depending upon, like if you have a really, most of the, like 99% of the time your pictures in Lightroom are going to look great. But if you zoom into over 800%, like sometimes the details can look wormy in certain situations. And if you do like a DNG conversion or whatever, and you let Lightroom do the demosaicing, you can find spots where, like, say like lips touch teeth, where the teeth are red instead of white,
doesn't quite do it properly.
Because like on the get really down there to the pixel level, it's just not the same bare array, and there's spots where you have 4 green pixels next to each other, and it's like, is that pixel green or red or orange or whatever? Right. And if you don't have a really good algorithm, you can get it wrong. And Lightroom's just still isn't on the same level as Fuji's JPEGs and camera.
That's a shame.
But it's like, that's always the battle, right? It's like Capture One's going to be better than Lightroom for Fuji images, but the library stuff and the subject detection and all the features in Lightroom are so much better that it's like you kind of have to pick which one you want. And I mean, that's why I edit with Lightroom. But
yeah,
I don't know. I wish that they would work with Fuji and kind of, I don't know, get a better, improve their X-trans algorithm or whatever.
Yeah, it seems like, why not? Sure, make it a better experience.
It's a shame because like the Fuji JPEGs are so good, but that's the battle for you when you shoot Fuji, is like, just like pick your film simulation, and if you shoot in JPEG, you're not gonna have to edit in Lightroom or anything, because like you're just gonna be happy with your images. I don't know. Whew, that was a lot.
You got a lot of thoughts.
Sure do.
That's going to do it for the show today. Thanks for joining us. And if you enjoyed it, we'd encourage you to rate us on iTunes and tell your photography friends about the show. Also, check out our website at cameragearpodcast.com to learn more or send us feedback and questions. We'll be back with more next week.